The lights of the studio bathed everything in a warm violet glow, the signature palette that made Graham Norton's stage look like some glamorous, slightly mischievous otherworld. The audience was electric, already primed with laughter before the show had truly begun. Every seat was filled, every face leaning forward in anticipation for the roundup of guests. Tom Hiddleston with his refined charm, Dua Lipa shimmering in a black sequin dress, a young comedian whose career was barely 3 years old, and finally, the crown jewel of the evening, Dame Judi Dench. She sat poised, as if carved from elegance itself, her hands resting atop one another and her expression serene yet sparkling. She seemed fully at ease, unaware that the night would grow infamous within minutes. Graham, seated in his red chair, leaned toward her with his trademark grin, the one that had carried his show for decades. "Judi, my love," he said, crossing one leg over the other, "we must talk about the rumors swirling around you lately." Judi lifted an eyebrow, not warily, but with that classic British mixture of curiosity and restraint. "Rumors? I wasn't aware I'd generated anything interesting enough for gossip." "Oh, don't be modest," Graham said playfully, flipping the cue cards in his hand. "Apparently, on the set of your latest film, your co-stars were reading lines to you because the font wasn't big enough for you to see." The audience chuckled. It wasn't malicious laughter, but the kind sparked by Graham's gentle ribbing. Under normal circumstances, Judi might have laughed it off. But tonight, something in the tone struck her just slightly wrong. Or perhaps she was tired of the subject. Or perhaps she simply expected better. Judy's expression didn't harden, not exactly, but it froze in place. "Ah yes," she said delicately, "the press loves to cling to anything that involves age, don't they?" Graham nodded eagerly, unaware of the shift. Of course. But it was quite a story. You on set, squinting at scripts like a schoolgirl cheating on an exam. The audience roared. Graham basked in it. Judi did not. Her voice softened. "Graham, I think it's important to understand that losing one's eyesight, even partially, is not something to mock." Graham blinked. "Mock? No, Judi, darling, it is a challenge," she interrupted gently, "and one that many people face. But it does not diminish their abilities, nor should it be used for amusement." The comedian next to Tom shifted in his seat, glancing nervously between the two. Even Dua Lipa, typically unshakable in her glamorous composure, looked down at her hands, sensing the temperature drop. Graham waved a hand dismissively. "Oh come now, you know me. I joke with everyone. I tease everyone. It's harmless." "Harmless," Judi repeated, as if testing the word. "To whom?" The question hung in the air like a dropped glass that hadn't shattered yet but was definitely falling. Graham tried to laugh it off. "Judi, you've played queens, spies, Shakespearean legends, you can handle a joke about your eyesight." "And I have," she replied calmly. "But what I cannot handle is being reduced to a punchline about aging. That, Graham, is beneath you." A ripple of surprise washed through the room. Judi wasn't angry, she was disappointed. And somehow, that was worse. Graham's smile faltered for the first time. "Well, I think you're taking this a bit personally." "Of course I'm taking it personally," Judi answered, her tone tightening imperceptibly. "It is personal. It is about my work, my body, and my future. I am allowed to defend those things." Tom Hiddleston, who had been seated like a polite statue, leaned slightly forward as though preparing to intervene if necessary. The comedian swallowed hard. Producers behind the cameras stiffened. Graham tried again, leaning back in his chair. "Listen, Judi, I'm not attacking you. It feels like you are." Her voice had lost none of its dignity, but it held a new edge. "We came here to discuss my film, not to dissect my physical vulnerabilities. But it's just a talking point." Graham insisted. "People are curious. It's harmless. And frankly, it makes for good television." Judy's eyes narrowed just a fraction, barely a movement, yet it felt like a line being drawn in the sand. "Perhaps the problem, then," she said softly, "is assuming that everything personal is fair game for entertainment." The audience stopped breathing. You could hear a pin drop. Even the humming LED lights above the stage seemed quieter. Graham exhaled, a touch of irritation creeping into his voice. "Judi, if you're going to nitpick everything I say." "I am not nitpicking," she said firmly. "I am asking for respect. Respect for my craft. Respect for the years I've given to this industry. And respect for the truth, that I am still more than capable of performing." Graham's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to this. Guests normally melted under his charm, laughed off everything he threw at them. Judi wasn't playing along. The audience sensed the tension knotting tighter and tighter. Graham dropped his cue cards onto the table. All right, well, if this is how the conversation is going to go, then maybe we should move on. No, Judi said, I don't think we should move on until you understand why your comment was hurtful. Graham's face flushed a shade redder than his chair. Hurtful, Judi, it was a joke. If you can't handle a joke then. He stopped himself, but too late. The audience heard it. The guests heard it. Judi heard it. She leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper but commanding the room. Are you suggesting that my discomfort is invalid? Graham swallowed. I'm suggesting that, maybe you're overreacting. The air froze. Judi blinked once, very slowly. Then she rose from the couch with elegant finality, smoothing her jacket with both hands. Then perhaps I should remove myself before I react any further. Backstage, the studio was a storm, silent in some pockets, frantic in others. Assistants whispered rapidly into headsets, producers darted between curtains, and the floor manager kept shouting conflicting instructions that no one fully heard. Judi Dench had just left the stage, and the shockwaves of her exit pulsed through every piece of equipment, every camera, every stunned face. But on the main stage, under the warm purple lights, Graham Norton remained frozen mid-step, one hand raised as if he could still call her back with a simple gesture. The studio audience sat rigid, a sea of wide eyes and parted lips, unsure whether to applaud, gasp, or just keep breathing. Finally, Graham lowered his hand, straightened his posture, and tried to gather the shattered pieces of the show into something resembling control. He forced a laugh, thin, brittle. Well, he said, his voice cracking ever so slightly, that escalated quickly. No one laughed with him. Tom Hiddleston stared at the floor, his jaw clenched in a way that betrayed the gentlemanly composure he clung to. Dua Lipa shifted uncomfortably on the couch, pressing her lips together, her expression soft with secondhand embarrassment. The young comedian sat stiff as a mannequin, clearly wishing he could melt into his seat or teleport into the nearest exit. Graham's forced smile lingered for one more agonizing second before collapsing entirely. The silence from the audience wasn't just silence, it was judgment. You could feel it, like heat from stage lights turned suddenly too bright. So, he tried again, shuffling his cards as if the right question might magically appear on one of them. Tom, let's, talk about your new film. Tom didn't answer. He looked up slowly, and his eyes met Graham's with a quiet kind of sternness that made the audience lean forward in anticipation. Graham, he said gently, I'm not sure now is the time. Graham blinked. I'm just trying to continue the show. I know, Tom replied, still soft-spoken. But I think we need to acknowledge what just happened. Dua Lipa nodded, almost imperceptibly. The comedian swallowed loudly. Graham bristled, insecurity prickling under his skin. I didn't attack her, he insisted, a little too defensively. I made a joke. A joke, the audience murmured, some agreeing, more disagreeing. Dua Lipa finally spoke, her voice delicate but earnest. I think she felt the joke touched something sensitive. Something personal. That's not my fault, Graham snapped before he could stop himself. I can't help it if she took it the wrong way. The audience reacted again, this time with discomfort more than shock. Tom leaned forward, clasping his hands. It's not about fault, it's about impact. She's Dame Judi Dench. She deserves what? Graham shot back, eyes narrowing. Immunity from humor, special treatment, respect. Tom replied simply. She deserves respect. The words struck the air like a gavel. Graham looked away, pressing his lips together, guilt flickering briefly across his face before stubbornness overtook it again. I didn't disrespect her. You dismissed her feelings, Dua said quietly. That can feel the same. A sudden swell of murmurs filled the studio, agreement, discomfort, whispers of he crossed a line, he didn't mean to, is she coming back? Graham looked at the audience, seeking support, but their expressions had shifted. They weren't angry, exactly, they were disappointed. That was worse. Look, Graham said, raising his hands, I love Judi. Everyone loves Judi, but she blew that way out of proportion. And walking off, that's dramatic, even for her. A wave of low boos rippled through the crowd. Graham's face paled. The floor manager stepped onto the stage, an unprecedented act on the show. He leaned in, whispering urgently into Graham's ear. Graham stiffened, clearly unhappy with whatever he'd just heard, but nodded reluctantly. He looked back to the audience and inhaled deeply. All right, he said, his voice steadier but strained, I've been advised that we should take a Apologize, someone shouted from the audience. The room murmured in agreement. Bring her back, another voice yelled. A third person added, you were too harsh. Graham's eyes widened. He had never seen his own audience revolt like this. This wasn't a panel show meltdown or a celebrity spat, this was genuine backlash, directed squarely at him. He looked helplessly at his guests. Tom gave him a meaningful look. Dua gave him a sympathetic one. Even the young comedian, though terrified of speaking up, nodded in support of the idea. Graham swallowed hard. He turned to the camera, slowly, deliberately, as though it weighed 1,000 pounds. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, before we continue, I'd like to address Dame Judi Dench. The audience fell silent again. Graham ran a hand through his hair, the facade crumbling at the edges. I didn't intend to hurt her. Truly, my humor sometimes goes too far. And tonight, it clearly did. Tom gave a small nod of approval. I want to apologize, Graham continued, to Judi, to the audience here, and to everyone watching. I shouldn't have dismissed her feelings. She is an icon, a treasure, and a remarkable performer, no matter what challenges she faces. The applause that followed was hesitant at first, then grew into something sincere. Graham looked toward the backstage curtain. And if she is willing, I would very much like to invite Dame Judi Dench back to the stage. A tense hush fell. Seconds passed. Then the purple curtain shifted. Judi Dench swept back in with the serene command of a queen entering her throne room, her chin high, her steps steady. The audience erupted in a standing ovation, cheers, whistles, applause that shook the studio floor. Graham stood quickly, relief flooding his face. Judi, he said, thank you for coming back.